why. Oh, there we go on the screen that we have here this morning. So Genesis chapter 37. I enjoy watching sports on TV. This time of year, I don't really watch too many sports because I'm normally busy out and doing summary type of things. One thing I have really enjoyed the last couple of years, and a lot of people don't necessarily like this, but I really like having the idea of having video replays. If there was a call that the referee made and it was the wrong call, I'd like video replays. Now, some people don't like it because it takes away from the sport or it takes too much time. A lot of arguments both ways. But one thing that drives me crazy is when they make the wrong call on the field, and then video replay shows that it's the wrong call, but for some reason, the people in charge don't change the call. And it just leaves me baffled, like why have video replay and take 5 minutes out of this game to replay it if they're not going to make the right call? Sometimes I'm just left baffled, and it really actually kind of drives me crazy because it's like, that's not fair, that's not right. That's why I love the video replay, is to get it right. And when they don't, it makes me want to turn the TV off. Occasionally, if it's a game I don't care about, I will turn it off because it just frustrates me that they can't get it right. But you know, all of us in life like things to be fair. Yet from a young child, most likely you had your parents tell you that life is not fair. We want it to be fair. We think it should be fair. And yet when it's not, it's so easy to get frustrated, especially as a follower of Jesus Christ. Because as a follower of Jesus Christ, we have the idea that, well, if I do this and do this and do that, everything will work out great for me and things will be wonderful, and it just logically makes sense. But there's sometimes that God doesn't do what we want logically. And that's where it often becomes hard. I was in a conversation with one of our children this week, and they were struggling with something, and they're like, this just makes sense logically. But that's where faith kicks in. Oh yeah, they said, I forgot about faith. It's easy to trust when everything's right in front of us, but when things don't make sense. And we're going to see this through the life of Joseph. And the life of Joseph is just an amazing story to remind us of the importance of staying faithful in the difficult times of life. Because really, there was a lot for Joseph that simply was not fair. If you remember where we left off last week, we had been talking about Jacob meeting Esau. He was scared. He was coming from the north here. He's right around here. Remember Mahanaim, the two camps we talked about. He ends up meeting Esau somewhere. We don't know exactly where, it doesn't say. And he meets him. Esau, Jacob's brother, embraces him, even though he had hated him many years before. And basically, Esau moves down to here, the land of Edom. In fact, chapter 36 talks much about Esau and the land of Edom, which is south or southeast of the land of Israel. And the reason I point this out is we're going to hear a lot about Edom as we study through the Old Testament. Edom is a major player when it comes to the land of Israel throughout the Old Testament. But now what happens in chapter 37 is there's a shift between the life of Jacob and Esau, again, the sons of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. Again, Abraham, the founder or the beginning of the Jewish race. And now the transition goes to the life of Joseph, which most of the rest of Genesis is about Joseph and his brothers. There's a small little part about Judah in chapter 38. But we want to see this, chapter 37, verse 1. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob, Joseph being 17 years old. Now take note of this. Joseph is 17 years old when this happens. He was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph was brought a bad report to the father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So just to catch you up, especially if you haven't been following along, Jacob's name is now changed to Israel. He has 12 sons at this point and a daughter. But yet he also has these 12 sons and daughter through 4 different wives. We've already seen a family conflict. Well, now what happens is Joseph sees his older brothers doing things that aren't exactly the way that Jacob or Israel would want them to be done. And he reports back to Israel, basically we would say a tattletale. Now, a lot of times that is a negative phrase. Sometimes we use that as a negative phrase, tattletale, but there is many times good when we see something wrong and we inform whoever's in charge or whoever's responsible so it can be corrected. Well, his brothers don't like the fact that Joseph here is telling on them. Kind of reminds me, I was the 4th child out of 5. So in general, I had a lot of the benefits of being a younger child, but I wasn't the baby of my family. And I can't tell you how many times I remember something happening, and maybe we did something to my younger sister, maybe we didn't. I don't know at times, because sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. And I remember many times those saying, please, just be quiet. Don't tell mom and dad. We'll just, don't stop crying, whatever. We don't want mom and dad to hear. We don't want, don't tell mom and dad what we just did or what we said. And it's kind of that younger person here. Joseph is here and he sees things his brothers are doing. Again, he's older. His brothers are really in the 30s and 40s. And yet he sees these things and he wants to tell his dad, hey, Dad, you don't know what my brothers are doing, but and we don't know what they were doing either, but he's telling on them. Well, how do you think his brothers feel? Oh, thank you, Joseph, for telling on us. This is wonderful. I'm so glad you're keeping us accountable. No, they don't like him. On top of that, they know that he's his dad's favorite. Now, maybe you have grown up with favoritism when it came down to your siblings. Maybe you're on the one side. To me, I kind of feel that maybe I was on the benefit of favoritism, like I really felt like maybe I was one of my parents' favorite. Now, I know they didn't play favorites, they said at least, but maybe you're on the other side where you had a sibling and you felt like they got all the things, advantages, and you didn't get that. Whatever the situation here, whether perceived or real in your mind, here it's very clear. Because Joseph gets this coat of many colors. Remember, Joseph is the oldest son of his beloved wife, Rachel, who is now dead. And this is the memory of Rachel is basically carried on through Joseph specifically and Joseph's brother, Benjamin. And his brothers despise him because he's loved more by the Father. And they can't stand being around him. And that leads us to Roman numeral number 1, that God is at work for our future good. Here is a boy who has done really nothing wrong, but is hated mainly because his father loves him. I mean, is that really fair to be hated simply because your father loves you? Now, you could say it's because he told on his brothers. Yes, that was part of it. But basically, because he has loved more, and the more his father loves him, the more he is hated by his brothers. We're going to see this repeated theme in Joseph. He did very little that Scripture records that was wrong. Doesn't mean he was perfect. But yet, in this narrative, every time he does the right thing, it seems like the wrong thing happens to him. Letter A, God revealed part of his plan to Joseph. Chapter 37, verse 5. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around, and it bowed down to my sheaf." Now keep in mind, remember, Joseph is 17 years old. He's the 11th child out of 12 children. He's despised by his brother, and he's like, "Hey guys, guess what? I had this great dream." If I'd be there like, "Shh, Joseph, don't tell anybody. They already hate you anyways." But he's like, and we don't know what his context is. I doubt he's bragging. I think it's just more, if you ever have an interesting dream, don't you want to tell somebody? Because it's just kind of really unique. Well, he has this dream, and in this dream, he says, "Look, I have this dream, and what happened is we're putting together these sheaves of wheat, and my sheaf was there, and all these other sheaves, these 11 others, bowed down to it." Well, what is his brothers going to think? This young guy kind of has the idea that we're going to bow down and worship him. They don't really like that thought. Verse 8. His brother said to him, "Are you indeed going to reign over us? Or are you indeed going to rule over us?" So they hated him more. Now get this, they keep hating him more. More and more and more. This hatred grows. Verse 9. And he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers. Now I kind of picture that maybe Joseph was a little naive in a sense to his brothers hating him. I think he had just the simplicity of life, and he's a 17-year-old kid, and he has this other dream. "Hey guys, I had this other dream." In it, he says, "The sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." So now he adds probably a reference to his parents or the elders, his mom and dad. Now his mom wasn't alive at the time, but those in charge of him. Basically, all my elders and my older brothers all bowed down to me, or to a star at least. This is where we see that God's way doesn't always make earthly sense. Verse 10. But when he told it to his fathers and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come and bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him. So they hate him. They're jealous of him. Jacob or Israel is saying, "Well, I don't know what your dream means." But notice this last part. But his father kept the saying in his mind. Remember, Jacob himself had a dream of this ladder going up to heaven with angels up and down. There are a few times that Jacob had these dreams. And Jacob is probably wondering, is God doing some miraculous event through Joseph? It doesn't fully make sense. Jacob's thinking about it, but he doesn't have much long to think about it, because we're going to see in a moment that he's going to find out or think that his son is going to be dead. Roman numeral number 2, God's plan may involve unfair treatment. This is a lesson that we all have to learn. And I find that almost as a father now, especially of adult children, that it's harder when somebody treats my children unfairly than when they treat me unfairly. I've been dealing with a situation this week where I think one of my children was kind of treated kind of unfairly in something. And I'll tell you what, that was really hard for me to take. Trying to help this child work through this issue, and that talking to this person who's treating them unfairly and trying to get this to work out. And it was really hard, and I kept having to remind myself, it might not be fair, but God is using this situation in that child's life. And Joseph is a prime example of this because his brothers treat him unfairly. Look at is Joseph's brothers are out several miles away, probably close to 100 miles away to the north, and they're grazing their sheep, and they're gone for a long time, and Jacob wants to know how the kids are doing. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." They hate him so much, they're planning to kill him. But yet we see that not all of Joseph's brothers wanted to do him harm. This is an important part to note as we see this. Verse 21, "But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, 'Let us not take his life.' And Reuben said to him, 'Shed no blood. Throw him into the pit here in the wilderness, but don't lay hands on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father.'" Reuben is the oldest child. He doesn't want to see anything happen to Joseph. We don't know if he had a soft spot for Joseph, or maybe it was for his father's sake. We don't know why. But Reuben doesn't want to see his brother dead. The reason I point this out is a lot of times when we go through difficult times, God will have people there protecting us, encouraging us. I remember when I first became a senior pastor years and years ago, I went through some difficult times. And one of the most valuable things were people in the church had written me letters of just encouragement to say, "I know some people might not like what's going on. I made some changes in the church. We introduced different music and different things into the church, and some people weren't happy. And they basically said, I want you to know that we're behind you. We support you. You know, sometimes it feels like everybody's against you, but understand there's people that are there at your side to help you, to support you, to encourage you." And Reuben tried to save the life of Joseph, but while Reuben was away, we see that Joseph was unfairly sold into slavery. Look at verse 23. "So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe and the robe of many colors that he wore. Then they took him and threw him in a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. They sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, myrrh on their way down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, 'What profit is if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he's a brother, our own flesh.' And his brothers listened to him." So basically, Judah's like, "Well, you know what? Let's be kind. He's our brother, you know. We shouldn't kill him. Let's just sell him into slavery and let's make money from him. You know, why kill him when we can make money from him?" So great brothers, right? You know, kind of like, well, he is our brother, so we shouldn't kill him, but we'll just make money and send him far away and we'll never see him again. So that's what happens. For 20 shekels of silver, it says, they sold him into slavery. Now let's go back and ask ourselves a question. What had Joseph done wrong? He told his brothers about it. And what happens to him? He gets sold into slavery down in Egypt, hundreds of miles away from home, as a 17-year-old kid. Have you ever felt rejected by God at times? I did this, God, and I did what was right here, and I did that was right here, and I did that was right here. And every time I do what's right, it seems like something bad happens. You ever said that phrase? The more I've tried to follow you, God, it just seems like this is falling apart. Maybe you didn't say it, maybe you felt it, you thought it. And on top of this, Joseph's brothers lie about him. We'll skip this passage, but basically the end of chapter 37, his brothers take the coat of his favorite son. Jacob's in great mourning. All these problems happen. And now Joseph is down in Egypt. That's where we see Roman numeral number 3. That God's reward for obedience may be different than we expect. I want you to take note of this. We often think, okay, if I do this, this, and this, then this will be the result. because God's got to do that. But many times, God rewards us with different things than we really expect. Sometimes way better, but sometimes way worse. What kind of loving Heavenly Father is that? To reward us with things that are more negative? But yet we're going to see as we continue to study the life of Joseph that God had this great master plan that Joseph knew nothing about at the time. Turn to chapter 39. As I mentioned, chapter 38 talks about Joseph. If you read through your devotional book this week, it contrasts Judah. It talks about Judah in chapter 38 and his wickedness and sin. But in chapter 39, we see the righteousness of Joseph, this kind of contrast where things go well for Judah, even though he's not necessarily a godly person, and things go wrong for Joseph, even though he is a godly person. Verse 1 of chapter 39. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. So Joseph is now placed, and basically he's bought by a pretty good boss, actually, a pretty good owner, slave owner, and this is Potiphar. And even in this difficulty and trial, Joseph experiences these blessings of God. Verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man and was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in the sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. Scripture doesn't clearly state it here. It does a little bit later on, we're going to see from Joseph's response. But it says God was with Joseph each step of the way. Yes, he was sold in slavery. Yes, he was made to leave his house. But God was still with him. But also note this. I believe Joseph didn't stray from God during this time either. Was it easy for him? Not at all. But I don't believe Joseph became angry and bitter, and we're going to see this in a week or two when we continue our study. I don't think he was angry and bitter because of everything his brothers did, because he had this trust in God. And the reason I say that, not only we're going to see what Joseph says later on, but also the fact that if Joseph became bitter and angry, he wouldn't have gotten this promotion in Potiphar's house to become in charge of everything. You see, if you're a slave owner and you have a slave owner who is bitter, angry, grumpy, doesn't want to do what you say, miserable to be around, are you going to promote him to second in charge? Not at all. But there's something special and unique about Joseph that Potiphar sees, and I believe it was a result of him simply submitting to God and doing things God's way. At the end of verse 6, it says, and because of Joseph, Potiphar had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Basically, he gave it over to Joseph to be the manager, and he didn't have any worries. Now, if you would talk to a store owner, one of the things that they would tell you is it's so difficult to find somebody who cares for your things like you care for them. And one of the hard things owners have the hard time doing is getting away from the business because they have to keep an eye on things. It's very few and far between that people find great managers who love and care for something like the owner does. And basically here, Joseph is trusted with everything because of this godly character that he displays. How do you think you would have responded if you were sold into slavery by your brothers? Now, it's hard for us to even imagine how this is, but let me ask you. How do you respond when things don't go well for you in the week? When somebody says something negative about you, when somebody does something to hurt you, how do you respond? That kind of gives evidence to how you would have responded. We see here that Joseph's blessings turned into a problem. Now, I say problem because in a human sense it seemed like a problem. It wasn't a problem for God. Look here at the end of verse 6. It says, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Basically, it says Joseph was buff. I mean, he was somebody who was good looking, he was strong, he was handsome, and you would probably call that a blessing from God. Now, I'm looking out here at this audience, and God has blessed you in this audience in such this way, right? Right? You look in the mirror and say, wow, I've been blessed by God. Joseph has this blessing. He's young, probably at this time in his mid to early 20s. He's handsome. He's good looking. And yet it's that very thing about him that actually causes his next problem. Again, it's an earthly problem, a difficulty he didn't start. He wasn't responsible for being a good-looking, strong, responsible young man. He just did his job that he was supposed to do. But, verse 7, after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. So now what happens is basically his master's wife becomes infatuated with Joseph, obsessed with him. She wants him to basically have sex with her. And she's constantly bugging him for this. I wonder if Joseph's like, man, I wish I was a lot uglier. You know, maybe she won't want me so bad. I don't know. But here it is. It's just a situation here that really should have been a good thing, but now all of a sudden she's after him. Verse 10 is saying, no, I can't do that. That's wrong. It's against what God says. Joseph is a man of great character. He's being pursued by this woman, and yet he's continually saying no. And he remains faithful to God. Look at verse 8. But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concerns about anything in the house. He has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am. Basically, he's saying, look, though he owns it, I'm the one who's in control over everything. He's only kept you back from me because you're his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He's like, no way, not a chance. I'm going to refuse you. I can't have you. You're not mine. Verse 11. But one day, when he went to the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand, and he fled and got out of the house. We see great character of Joseph. Joseph was being begged day after day after day. Finally, there's a chance. Nobody's at home. He could do whatever he wants with her, and nobody would know. And yet in this godly character, he says, no, I'm not going to do it. And he runs to the point when she grabs his robe, trying to keep him back, and he slips out of that, and he goes. He goes away. Well, she's not happy. He's rejected her over and over again, one too many times. Basically, verses 13 through 15, Potiphar comes home, and she says to him, she says that Joseph tried to force him. Basically, Joseph tried to rape her, is what she says. It's like the complete opposite of what actually happened. Joseph did the right thing, displayed godly character, did everything that God wanted him to do. And what happens? He gets lied about. The end result, verse 20. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. He did the very right thing that God wanted him to do. And what does God do to him? Throws him in jail, basically. Now again, I want to emphasize this because there are times in our life where we do exactly what God wants us to do, and the earthly results are the opposite of what they think we did. Here, what should have happened in my earthly perspective is Joseph should have been exalted and honored by God because you were godly and righteous and holy, and therefore I'm going to give you an even greater thing, and you're going to now own Potiphar's house, or whatever I would say would be the rags to riches story we want to hear. Instead, what takes place is now he's thrown into prison. And yet this whole time, Joseph is being faithful to God. It's this faithfulness that causes these difficulties. And yet Joseph refused to turn from God. How do I know he refused to turn from God? Verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Again, if Joseph is bitter, angry, upset, he's not going to find favor in the eyes of the prison keeper. No, instead his attitude is one that he wins this favor, and God is with him even in the middle of prison, this trial. And Joseph saw God work in the midst of difficult circumstances. Look at verse 22. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made him succeed. This week, one of my daughters, I can tell you which one because I only have one home right now, Brooklyn, a few weeks ago said, we should watch the Rocky movies in the summertime. And I'm a big Rocky fan. I like the Rocky movies. To me, my favorite is Rocky IV. Some people would disagree with me about that, but that's my favorite one. And so I'm like, sure, yeah, let's do it. And so we watch the Rocky movies, and it's so funny because it's interesting how it appeals to me in certain things. Like even there's this one part in Rocky II that just like every time I watch this scene, I like chills come over my body. There's just something interesting about it. And when it's about to take place, and we don't watch it too much, but when it's about to happen, my wife looks at me knowing how I'm going to respond every time this scene comes up. Again, it's been 5 years since we've watched them, but she remembered that there's something special about the scene. But you know, in this, the whole theme of the Rocky movies, if you've ever watched them, is basically he just gets beat. I wish real boxing was like you'd see in the Rocky movies because they just keep throwing punches over and over and over. If you ever watch real boxing, what do they do for the whole time? They dance around or they hug each other. You know, they dance, they throw a punch, and then they're hugging each other, and they got to break apart. It's boring, most regular boxing. Now, it's not like Rocky. Of course, that's all fake. We know that. But the thing is he has this beating, and he takes this beating, but yet he keeps getting back up. He keeps getting back up. He keeps focused on what he wants to do. That's really kind of the picture here of Joseph. He takes this beating over and over and over again. But what does he do? He stays with it. He doesn't quit on God. God never quits on him. The whole time, even through the tragedies that are taking place, the earth of Joseph's mind through this whole event. In conclusion, I want you to ask yourself these questions. First, do you realize that God has future plans for you? Now, I say that because Joseph here was 17, and he's getting thrown in a pit. He's ended up getting thrown in jail, probably in his early, mid-20s. Here he is. This is all part of God's plan. We're going to see this unfold the next couple weeks. If you've done your study, most of you have probably heard of Joseph. You know what happened. But focus on this, because there's a lot of times in the middle of our life where we don't see what's happening. We don't see what's taking place. but understand that God is taking care of you. Second, have you been treated unfairly? All of us have. How do you respond? Do you respond by trusting in God? Or do you get upset, bitter, angry at individuals, at groups, or organizations, whoever it is? I'll give a practical example. Just this week, we passed by this couple. Many of you know that before we started Lakeshore Fellowship almost 10 years ago, I was pastoring a small church in the community, and basically they kicked me out for being pastor after about 4 months. Nothing I had done whatsoever. I changed the music order of the service, and they didn't like that, and they asked me to leave. And also we put up an offering box, and we stopped taking an offering at that time. And so they asked me to leave. And I see this pastor and his wife every once in a while, and it's easy when I see them to kind of like, well, how come you did that to me, and be angry at them. But it's because of that basically I started Lakeshore Fellowship. I didn't really want to. I ended up doing it, and God's blessed that. Because of that, Homestead then contacted me. If I was at that other church, I wouldn't have been able to do it, and I started pastoring here. And I look back, and my wife and I, every time we interact with that couple or see that family, we're like, I'm so thankful they kicked us out. I really am. It wasn't easy. It was painful at the time. But yet ultimately, wow, God did an amazing thing. And lastly, are you remaining faithful through difficult circumstances? Are you faithful, even when you can't see how it's going to work out? Most of us know the end of the story of Joseph. And we're like, this is so cool. But we forget the 13 years between he was 17 and 30, where the end of the story comes out to be greatly victorious. We forget those 13 years. Sometimes we're in the middle of those 13 years where we just don't see the end. And many times we won't see the end until we get to glory, and then God will reveal them. Oh, that's what you were doing. I want everyone to take a moment just to bow your heads, close your eyes, let God speak to your heart and mind this morning.